Hey there, everyone. Today we're going to continue on the same topic that we were on before, that being what is the church? And this time we're going to be continuing on from slightly a different angle, yet again. And this time it's the topic of the ministry. So we're going to just go into it just on the surface. We're not going to get into a lot of detail or go through a whole bunch of scriptures. We're just going to go through enough just to demonstrate what the ministry is according to scriptures. So just a brief recap on what we've gone through so far. We've basically, first thing is just what is the church, and we went through passages in scriptures just dealing in a straightforward manner with the term the church and how it's used. And then we saw who builds the church, which of course is Christ. We saw that Christ is the head of the church. We saw in another video that the church has no authority of its own, but all the authority in the church is Christ's authority, and the church is always subject, never sovereign. We saw, we had a video about dealing with heretics. We saw counterfeit organizations, and we saw as well, in connection with the counterfeit organizations, we were looking at flattering titles is the last thing we looked at. So now we're going to look at the ministry, and this is in connection very much so with what we looked at before with, the church authority. The reason for this is because today the regular conception of what the ministry is that the ministry is basically the leadership of the church. The ministry is the people in charge. And so we're going to look at some passages to see if that's the case. So as always, before we look into it, if you could pause the video and take some time to pray, that would be definitely beneficial. Okay, so we're going to start in the book of Ephesians, and we're going to start Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. It says, and he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body. So here we have just a little compact, definition almost, or description of what the ministry is. Here it says that all these things have been given, these gifts in the church, apostleship, prophets, evangelists, teachers, pastors, so on and so forth, all those have been given for the ministry. So that's all a part of the ministry. Now some might say, well, those gifts are only for the leaders. But when we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, we see something kind of different there. So again, I'd ask you to read the whole chapter. We're not going to read the whole thing now, but we're going to read a large portion of it, starting at verse 1. And I want you to notice a few things, and I'm going to emphasize just a few parts here because there's something that it shows that leads us to believe, well, not only leads us to believe, it says that these gifts are not just for the leadership, or what we would call leadership. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Wherefore I gave you to understand that no man speaketh by the Spirit of God, speaking by the Spirit of God, calleth Jesus accursed, and that no man can say that Jesus is the Lord, but by the Holy Ghost. Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are differences of ministries, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man, emphasis, to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, and to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, and to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the work of miracles, to another prophecy, to other discerning of spirits, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as she will. For as the body is one, and hath many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we are bond or free, for we have been all made to drink into one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, Because I am not of the hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear shall say, Because I am not the eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where were the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where were the smelling? But now hath God set members every one of them in the body, as it hath pleased him. And if there were all one member, where were the body? And now are they many members, yet but one body. And the eye cannot say unto the hand, I have no need of thee, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Nay, but much more those members of the body which seem to be more feeble are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, upon these we bestow more abundant honor, and our uncomely parts have more abundant comeliness. For our comely parts have no need, but God hath tempered the body together, having given much more abundant honor to that part which lacked. And there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. And whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it, or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now ye are the body of Christ, all members and members in particular. And God hath set some in the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, governments, diversities of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all workers of miracles? Have all the gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? But covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet shew I unto you a more excellent way. So I said I wasn't going to read the whole thing, but then as I was reading, I was realizing the relevance of many of the things that were said there, and the continuity of thought, especially since I wanted to read the part at the end. So, anyways, we see the whole thing now. Now, the question is, according to this, the gifts in the church, are they just for those who we would call ministers, or are they really for everyone? And so I hope you can see here that these gifts are for everyone. These are for the whole body, the whole church. And no one part of the body, whether they're leader or whatever, is to be raised above the others. Now, it's true that some have been given to be in that position of leading others, right? But that doesn't mean that they only have the gifts, or that only they are the ministry. So this comes to something else that we will get into more in later videos, and that's the word for ministry. The word for ministry in Greek is diakonos. And there's three, there's diakonia is another variation of that. And there's one more variation, which, to be honest, I'm not quite sure of the pronunciation or the accurate pronunciation of it right now. So I will refrain from trying. But basically we have this word, and it's the word that is more or less transliterated, or the phonetics of that coming into English is where we get the word deacon, right? Diakonos, deacon. You can see the phonetic relationship. Now that is the word that's, whenever we see the word ministry in the Bible, that's usually the Greek word behind it in the New Testament. And so this, we'll have another video dealing specifically with deacons and that whole situation there, but this is I just wanted to mention that now, but we won't get into it in detail. But basically we can see that these gifts are for the whole church. And what that shows is that the whole church, all these gifts have been given for what? For the ministry. So the whole purpose is to minister. Now that Greek word, diakonos, doesn't mean leadership. It doesn't carry with it the connotation of one to rule over or to guide or to lead. What it means is a servant, and which we'll get into in more detail, but in secular Greek writings, it is used for, a waiter of tables, or one who serves food at a wedding, or a servant, just generally speaking. It means servant, one who serves. And so, this isn't really a leadership term, it's a servant term. And we as believers are to be servants to Christ and to each other and to the world, of course. So we're going to look at a few more passages here. Matthew chapter 20, verse 26 is another relevant passage to this topic. Okay. Matthew 20:26, it says, "But it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you, let him be your servant," or your minister in King James, but it's the word diakonos, or, servant. So this is the role of the ministry. If we are to be great, let us be servants. Let us be, one who serves, and that's a minister. To minister to someone is to serve them. And so, let's see, we're going to move on to a few more passages. Matthew 23:11. It says basically the same thing, but we're going to read it anyways. It says, "But he that is great among you shall be your servant, shall be your minister," your diakonos, right? That's the same word. So if we want to be great, it's not to lead people, it's not to rule over people, it's to serve them, right? It's to try our best to help them with the spirit of love. That is what true ministry is, and that's something we are all to do. Now, Mark chapter 9, verse 35. Again, a similar passage. It says here, Mark 9:35. Okay. "And he sat down and called the 12, and saith unto them, If any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all, and servant of all." The same word there, diakonos. And again, it's this concept. Being a servant is not to be raised up over people. To be a minister, I should say, is not to raise yourself up over people and to lead a congregation and to preach to people. You're standing up in front of everyone else and everyone is just sitting there listening to you. That's not what it means to be a minister. To be a minister doesn't mean you went to a theological seminary and have a certificate saying that you've been ordained to be a minister. A minister means you are a receiver. You have received gifts of the Spirit, and you are using those gifts for the benefit of the body and for the benefit of others. You're serving people with that gift. That's what it means to be part of the ministry. And in the next video, we'll go through more passages that deal with this particular aspect, but in the scriptures, certain people are called a minister or a deacon or a servant, and many people, when it uses the word minister, think of it as some high position. When it uses the word deacon, it's some sort of lower position. People think of it as a lower form of ministry, and there's kind of a debate over what a deacon is, as far as what people would call the office of a deacon, which in the Bible there's really no such thing. But some churches, their conception of what a deacon is a lower order of clergy, and others have the idea that it is a higher order of laity. So either way, it's ministers are up here, deacons are down here, when really it's from the same word in Greek. It's not, there's no difference made in the New Testament. So Romans chapter 15 verse 8 says, "Now I say that Jesus Christ was a diakonos, minister of the circumcision for the truth of God, to confirm the promises made unto the fathers." So here it says that Christ was a diakonos, a minister, a deacon, a servant. These terms are synonymous. Now in our minds, when we put a minister, oh yeah, he had some sort of higher status. But if we were to use the word deacon there in our translations, all of a sudden it'd be like, what? Christ is a deacon? You know, it would seem strange to us. That's because we've been going with the interpretation that the translators have put into the text, not with what the text itself says. And we have to get back to what the text itself says in order to have an accurate view of what the New Testament is really teaching. So Christ is called a servant, right? And you see that he came to serve. He didn't come to rule over us, although he is a king, and he is our Lord, and he is our ruler, but he came to show us what it is to be a servant. You know, when he went and washed the feet of the disciples, he was showing them service. He was showing them ministry. He was ministering to them. And that's his role as a servant. So another one which we'll touch on more, I'm sure, in multiple videos, is Romans 16 verse 1. It says, "I commend unto you Phoebe, our sister, who is a servant, diakonos, of the church which is at Centria." Now here Phoebe, a woman, is called a servant. Now when we use the word servant, that sounds okay to people, right? Now if I was just to be consistent and use the same word that was used in the previous chapter, Romans 15 verse 8, if I was to use the same word to translate the same word, again, the word minister in Romans 15 verse 8 is diakonos. That is the exact same word used in Romans 16:1 for servant, diakonos. So if I was to translate it with the same word and be consistent, all of a sudden Phoebe becomes a minister, or Christ becomes a servant. Both views some people have some sort of issue with for some reason. Now the thing is, Phoebe here is a minister just as much as Christ was a minister. I mean, obviously he was a perfect minister, right? And as humans, we're all imperfect ministers. So in that sense, no, but in the sense of it's attributing the same word equally to Phoebe, to Christ, it attributes it to Paul and Apollos and Timothy and all the believers. You know, it's not that a woman is a lesser minister than a man. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's saying ministers are servants. People have the phrase, the ground is level at the foot of the cross. And I really appreciate that phrase because it's biblical, right? And it's something for us all to consider and look into more. Now, just one more thing I'll touch on. I should have touched on this a little bit earlier. This is actually, Ephesians chapter 4 again, verse 7. And this is in the context. Please, read the whole chapter because there's a few other important statements that it makes. But in verse 7, it shows us the same thing, that these gifts are for everyone. Because, again, verse 11 and 12 are where it talks about the different gifts that are given for the ministry. Now, just a few verses before that, in verse 7, it gives a broader context, saying, "But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ." Right? And so, and as it keeps going, you'll see the gift that it's talking about is the gift that he gave when he ascended on high, the gifts of the Spirit. And unto every one of us is given those gifts. So as we can see, just from these few simple passages, the ministry is encompassing of all believers. The ministry is not some higher order of believers above deacons and a broader form of clergy, yet below bishops or something like that. It's not, that is an artificial system of ecclesiastical machinery that has been set up by men. And we have to come into recognition of the gospel order of ministry. We have to recognize that we are all equal in ministry. We all have equal privileges in ministry. We are all given different gifts. We do not all perform the same functions, but the gifts are given to every believer, male and female, Jew and Gentile, bond and free, all alike. We're all equal under Christ. We're all part of Christ's ministry, whether you have a theological degree or not. So, again, I hope you see how this ties into what is the church. Our perception of the church has been so twisted, and all these different elements need to get put together, and that's why I'm doing this series of videos. Again, if you want to see the other videos, you can go to the playlist that this is a part of, which is easy to do. You can either go to my channel page, click Browse Videos, and then Playlists, and you'll see it. It's a playlist called What is the Church? Or on the channel page, you will see a featured playlist on the side. And actually, you know what? I might not have called the playlist What is the Church. I think it might be under a playlist called 1888. Either way, that may change from time to time, so I figure I'll mention both. So, any comments, questions, or just if you want to discuss anything, whether related to this subject or not, feel free to comment, leave me a message. If you know how to contact me in any other way, feel free. Alright, well, blessings to you all, and may the Lord be with you.